Benjamin Franklin once said, "The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten." The fact is, quality matters. Join us as we make quality fun, interesting, and accessible to companies of all levels. Quality Matters is a must listen for all things quality. Listen in, ask questions, and get back to doing what matters most. Quality Matters, brought to you by Texas Quality Assurance, where quality management gets simplified.
Hello and welcome back to the Quality Matters podcast. I am Kyle Chambers with Texas Quality Assurance, and we are continuing on our mini series about the consultation process. So the goal here of this mini series is if you are a consultant out there, hey, we're kind of trying to give away a little bit of the secret sauce here. So hopefully this is something that will help you better serve your clients. But also, if you are the quality manager in an organization and you're looking to make some improvements, but maybe you don't have the budget to hire a consultant, or you're not real sure where to start, or you just want to learn more before starting the process, really think this is going to be an amazing mini series for you. So check out the previous few videos. We're going to have a few more coming. We may intersperse a few different topics here coming soon, but we'll get this finished and get it going. But again, that really is my goal, that this can be a very useful, helpful resource for you, help you understand the process better. Consultation is one of these things where, honestly, consultant's kind of a dirty word in my book. Now, well, yes, I am a consultant. Honestly, it's a little bit of a dirty word, because I think we all know what, when you say consultant, we all kind of know what that means. We see dollar figures go up. We see a bunch of meetings in our heads, and probably not a lot of progress, because it's typically in that consultant's best interest to drag the project out. Believe me, I personally understand the temptation in doing it, but you just can't do it if you want to do business properly and effectively. So let's continue with this process. So what we're going to talk about today is, following up on our previous discussions. We went through the gap assessment, talked about documented information. We talked about suppliers. So today we're going to talk about some of these other kind of support processes around quality management. Now, well, yes, document control, supplier approval, both kind of support processes. What I'm looking at here is some of these other smaller processes that apply. So we're going to be taking a look at things like monitoring and measuring of the management system. Now, if you're listening in, you're like, well, Kyle, those are not in the support processes section of the ISO 9001 standard. No, it's not, but they really are support processes. And the fact is, if you take a look at the 2015 edition of 9001, it's actually kind of hard to place each clause on that PDCA process map. So if you're listening to this, you're like, Kyle, what in the heck are you talking about? If you go look at the start of the standard, it's going to have a PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. If that's a concept you're not familiar with, we've got some old episodes. I'm going to avoid going down that rabbit hole right now. But they try real hard to map the clause of the standard onto a process map. Are we planning, doing, checking, or taking some sort of an action? Unfortunately, the clauses don't always fit perfectly in one of those sections. Just the way it was written, nothing says it has to fit that. But, they try, and it doesn't always work. So if we're taking a look at monitoring and measuring of the management system, I call this kind of one of our support processes, because it really applies throughout the management system itself. So how do we check it? How do we know how well our management system is doing? Well, one way to do that is we're going to look at our quality objectives. Quality objectives are the top level KPIs, I guess you could say, for your organization. Now, I've had a lot of folks ask about quality objectives early on, if they have any KPIs. Oh, yeah, we've got KPIs for this, that, and the other. Like, that's great. But here's what we want to look at for the quality objectives. And this is why they're a little bit different when we're talking about monitoring, measuring of the management system, is they are the top level litmus test, right? Like, you're not going to have, if you're having issues here, you've got some other serious issues going on. So, let me see if I can think of maybe a good real world example. So we've got an above ground swimming pool. I hate it. I absolutely hate the swimming pool. My kids love it. My wife loves it. So, hey, I keep it going, but I truly hate it. The reason I hate it is because I cannot get the chemicals and the pH and the algae and everything else to work right and to stay right. But I'll tell you what I have figured out is those little test strips they give you are actually really, really good indicators that you screwed up 3 or 4 days earlier. Kind of the same idea with quality objectives. The quality objectives, once those things start going south, you know that you've already had issues for a long time. They are kind of your last chance to fix things before they go catastrophic. So I'll tell you something I found is you put in a certain amount of chlorine on a regular basis. If you maintain that chlorine on a regular basis and no kids swim in the pool and it doesn't rain and there's no big dust storms to come through, which, yes, we've got kind of, I can't say dust storm, but we sure enough get wind where it looks like it's foggy and it's nothing but dust in the air. As long as none of those things happen, the chlorine levels are going to stay the same. You keep putting in same amount goes in, same amount goes out. It's a nice stable process. The kids get in and all they do is swim, not a problem. Chlorine levels dip for a day, they come back up, life's good, we're fine. The problem is when you get the kids in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, they've got all the dust and the dirt with them, in and out, in and out, in and out. And I may not know that occurred because I was at the office that day. I was traveling that day. I have no idea they got in and out 500 times. And that just absolutely depletes levels. But I can know that the next day. I take my test, I check the chlorine levels. Oh, they're low. That's odd. I wonder why they're low. Something must have happened for them to go low because they don't go low otherwise. And it gives me an opportunity to take some action. Okay, so this is the idea with our top level quality objectives. We don't want them to go bad. By the time they go bad, we've already had issues that have occurred that we've got to go figure out, kind of like me with the chlorine on it. Now, if I don't check that chlorine level regularly, I wouldn't know until 3 or 4 days from now, poof, the whole thing is suddenly green and nasty, and it can happen that fast. And right now it's green and nasty because it's cold outside and I don't want to get in there and clean all the green and nasty out. So we don't want to treat our quality objectives quite the same way, but they do work in a real similar manner. Now, again, that's top level of the entire management system. What we want to look at for monitoring and measuring of the management system is on a day-to-day basis. We're not looking at month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter, year-to-year. Day-to-day, how are we doing? Now, when I say that, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh, well, I want like a dashboard. I want a real big dashboard with all of the greens and the reds and the yellows. And I want the pie charts. I want all this type of stuff. Cool. I won't lie. If someone could bring me a dashboard every day, and nice little printout. And I'm like, oh, good. Well, we're up in sales on software over here. Oh, we're a little bit down on our internal audits, but this time of year that makes sense. And oh, looks like we're going over budget on this project over here. Man, that'd be great. Really would. Problem is, a lot of small businesses don't do that for the very same reason I don't do that, is it takes a lot of manpower to build, populate, and keep those scorecards up to date. Now, to a degree, you can do them with data that exists in your system, but it largely depends on human interaction to update those things and to maintain them. And small business, generally, we don't have the extra payroll, the extra manpower laying around for things like that. So what I advise folks to do, and this only works with a couple of caveats, is we're going to make an assumption. The assumption is that a management system operates compliant unless we document a nonconformance. So I really like to extend the scope of our control of nonconforming outputs process. And I like to extend it so that we're looking at any process within our management system, not just nonconforming product, but any process within our management system. The reason being is if we use our nonconformance reporting process for any nonconforming output throughout our organization, well, that's our evidence that unless we document in nonconformance, we can make the assumption that we are operating in a conforming manner, in a compliant manner. Okay, well, that's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now, this does mean that we need to make some changes to our control of nonconforming outputs process. And this is also the reason that I said we're going to kind of talk about some of the sort of supporting processes around here. There's lots of stuff gets tied into this. So when we're looking at our control of nonconforming outputs process, we've got to make certain that with it, we account for these non-product related nonconforming outputs. Now, the way we do that with our QMS software, TQA Cloud, and you can do this with your Excel form or whatever else it is, or hey, as little as $100 a month. You can get TQA Cloud for 3 users. Fantastic full QMS. There's my little sales spiel on that. But hey, whatever tool you've got, you can make it work. You don't have to use ours. Of course, kid. But we have what we call defect codes. The idea of the defect codes, we've got a couple of tiers of our defect code. So tier 1 defect code might be production related. Okay, so this is incorrect material. This is a crack. This is porosity. This is whatever issues we might run into in our production process. Then we might have a sales defect code. Okay, so, or maybe we might put it as contract review. Like we didn't get the final signature on this one before we moved on with the adder. Well, how are we going to account for that? Maybe we quoted the wrong part and we want to record that the wrong part was quoted and how the issue was addressed and handled. We might have a receiving code on there, and we're going to note when we received incorrect material. Maybe it came in without the material search or without the SDS or, whatever the case may be. But we're going to have these codes and we're going to track the data based off these defect codes. And that's going to allow us to do a lot of really, really great analysis across our organization by using our non-conformance reporting process. My goal with the consultation is that we keep everything as nice and neat, tight, packed together as we can. We don't want a lot of additional processes that aren't necessarily necessary. So you'll find, and truth be told, we didn't even include it in TQA Cloud until the last year. I never really consulted on folks utilizing processes like a management of change process and engineering change notifications in standard, unless there was a very specific need for it. And you may be listening to this thinking like, Kyle, that's kind of crazy, but not entirely. So if we're looking at a quality management process and we're going to be making a change to our process, we want to record that change. Why are we making that change? For a young, immature management system, 9 times out of 10, if not more, the reason for that change is we had a nonconformity. Well, the management tool we have if we're making a change because of a known nonconformity is a corrective action tool. So issue a corrective action. Once we get into a little bit of a more mature status, then we can start taking a look at things like management of change. We're making a change that doesn't necessarily impact our production system directly. Maybe we're moving from one office location to another. It's going to be the same process from point A to point B, but lots of changes going on. But it's nothing to do with nonconformity. It's nothing to do with major issues like that. This isn't anything like that. Okay, management change can be useful. Another instance where we found management change tool can be very useful is when you've got an online list of forms, say something like I think it's called Go Canva, or maybe you've got like a Smart Sheets or something like that, and we're making a change to how we collect data using those forms. Well, those forms, those electronic forms aren't like our Word and Excel documents where on the header of the document, we can put the approved by or published by, the version number, the version date. It's kind of harder to do that over there. And then to keep track of the version history, to keep track of who approved it. Again, like with our TQA Cloud QMS software or other quality management softwares out there, is when you approve a document, it maintains history of who approved it. And you can keep track of notes and comments and things like that. These other tools, maybe yes, maybe no. So management of change can be a really, really useful tool when we're making changes to documented information that exists in some other third-party software. Really, really useful for that. Engineering change notification, same type thing. If we're doing an ECN, we have to be sure, are we doing this because we had a nonconformity and we're trying to prevent an issue, in which case we really need a corrective action, or is this just part of the design process, maybe change preparing for the next design step, some new improvement we have, kind of depends there. But what we really want to do is take a look and determine, are we trying to prevent a future mistake? If so, we want to do a corrective action. Now, let's say that we found that there was a flaw with our design. Okay. So, and trust me, all of this gets captured in a monitoring and measuring of our management system. So when we use these tools, we want to make sure we track when and how often we use them, because all of this gets reported. Let's say that we identified that we had a problem in our initial design. Now, maybe we're not talking about a very large, complex design. We're talking about something fairly simple. I designed a better Post-it. I've got my design documents for my Post-it pack. Okay. And let's say that we do a little bit of a custom one. In any case, so we found that we had some sort of flaw with it, maybe with wrong thickness of the paper identified on our documentation, maybe, the wrong size on the cut, whatever it may be. We want to issue an ECN to fix that design flaw. Okay. Well, we're not necessarily changing the process going forward. We're just fixing a design flaw. Not a problem. ECN is a really great tool to show, hey, we're recording that we're making the change from this to this. We're going to re-verify, revalidate the results. Life's good. And then we want to report on these things as well. And the goal being that at the end of the year, we are reporting on where our nonconformities were, what issues we had with them, what changes we made, how many documents we reapproved, reevaluated, so on and so forth. So these are the things that we're going to be wanting to report on for that monitoring and measuring of our management system. Now, again, would be great if we could have a dashboard where we're tracking all of the things we care about. It's tough to do for a small business. I find typically companies can't find the payroll and additional manpower until they cross about 150, 200 employee mark. So until you get to that point, let's utilize our control of non-conforming outputs process. Let's issue NCRs when we have problems. Let's report on the results of our NCRs across all of the different work areas, across all of the different defect codes. You can even use it for your safety related issues, provided that we are not reporting on an incident where medical treatment was involved, because then we've got some issues with legal requirements related to medical records. Of course, all that seemed to go a little bit out the window during COVID, but we're kind of a little bit back to normal. So let's try to treat things properly. And we really, really want to protect our employees' medical records. So we don't report using a non-conformance report when that's the case. But let's say that we identified a potential for a spill. We identified that we had a little bit of an oil spill, or we had some issues with some rigging, or someone not utilizing PPE, whatever the case may be. Fantastic opportunities for non-conformance reports as well. We want to record how frequently these things occurred, which also means that our non-conformance reporting process must be very simple, quick, and easy to use. If it takes you more than about 5 minutes to fill out and process a non-conformance report, you've probably got too complicated of a process in place, too complicated of a form. We want to trim that back, and we want to make it as simple as can be. Because again, your NCR as a small business is one of your absolute best and most valuable tools for reporting on the health of your management system itself. Now, you might be saying, and I say this in my head all the time, well, Kyle, we want to recognize what's good. We do. But I'm sure y'all have all seen this. We have the big management meetings, and they talk about all the great things and all the progress we're making, and then just skim over all the little issues because we don't really want to talk about that. But you can't do that when we're utilizing our nonconformities as the basis of our reporting for the health of our management system. Now, as you grow and expand, we can add all of the good stuff that happened up there. And we want to maximize the good, no doubt about it. But maximizing the good without eliminating the bad, well, that's just spin. That's just cover up. That's just sweeping stuff under the rug, whatever you want to call it. And that is not what we want to do. That is not how we want to run our business. What winds up happening is that's when folks start calling this the ISO system instead of this is just our business. The idea being that your management system reflects the status of your business, how it works, how it functions, how it operates. We really don't want it to be a separate system overlaid on top of how you currently do your business. All right. So those are the basics of monitoring and measuring of the management system, but it touches on a lot of other areas. One of the things with that too is I like to use our supplier process. I like for our supplier process to connect directly to our control of non-conforming outputs as well. So again, in the TQA Cloud QMS software, you can do this on your own systems, however else you use it, is when we have an NCR, I like to have the option to select the supplier. Was a supplier involved here? If so, what was the issue? So in this case, we would identify as this is an external NCR. This was supplier related. We select the supplier from the drop-down list and then move on from there and identify what the issues we had with that supplier are. Same type thing is true with any customer complaints. Now, this is one thing too, that customer complaint. That complaint's a weird word. I had a little bit of a discussion with the client, probably, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months ago. And we were talking about that very concept, like customer complaint. Like, well, we really don't get many customer complaints, is what they're telling me. I'm like, well, guys, I'm looking at your reworks and your NCRs, and customers are finding a lot of issues. Oh, well, they found the issue. They just didn't complain about it. They just told us about it. I'm like, okay, so here's the distinction that the term customer complaint um, need not mean that the customer's ready to can you. By the time that happens, it's a little bit late. So we want to make sure to address it before then. But in this case, these folks are really, really fantastic at working with and taking care of their customer. And this had become kind of the normal way of doing it, that we do good 99% of the time, but the 1% we don't. The customer tells us about it. We bend over backwards, we make it right. I mean, it worked for them. They're a highly successful business, and their customers really love them. But what we're moving to now is a world where they personally are very disappointed with themselves if the customer finds an issue that they themselves did not first find. And so that's what we're working towards, what we're trying to get to. And the best way to do that was every time we had one of these issues, what they had been doing previously is only recording this in their basically in their sales tools, and they would record it as a rework, and then they'd reship however much of the new product, and it didn't necessarily get recorded. Then we started recording it as an NCR, and then we started identifying it specifically as a customer identified NCR. Once we started narrowing it down and being able to filter out the customer identified NCRs, we're really able to start to figure out where our issues were, maybe what parts it was with, what area it was in, start putting some inspection processes in place, and lots of good things happened as a result of that. So again, when we're doing this consultation process, these are the type of things we need to think about is, well, who's going to get complaints from our customer? Who's going to get feedback from a customer? Do we need to define customer complaint as only when they're upset, or just anytime they identify a nonconformity that we could have resolved? And that's really the definition that I tend to go to. It's customer identified a nonconformity. They're the last people we want to identify nonconformity. Now, could be we've got a fantastic customer, fantastic relationship, and they were glad they found it and helped us fix it. You can't ask for a better customer than that. But we know that we don't always get those types. We want to make sure that we take care of them. But that's kind of the gist, folks, on some of these support processes when it comes to monitoring and reporting on the management system. So today's episode, I guess, is going to be just a little bit short of normal, but that's what I've got for you. So I hope that this is helpful, and we will talk soon.